After I dedicated my life to the nation, my brothers had a complete breakdown. On the day of my 18th birthday party, my two older brothers brought home a 7-year-old orphan girl. For her, my oldest brother slapped me across the face. My second brother furiously told me to get out and don't ever come back. I didn't say another word. I just picked up my suitcase and left. They thought I was just throwing a tantrum and would be back in a few days. Enjoying the rare peace and quiet, my brothers took the orphan girl on a trip abroad to see the northern lights in Norway, the one place I had always dreamed of going. It wasn't until many days later, after they returned, that they found out I had joined a classified 10-year medical research project. I could never go home again. That night, they fell apart. The day I booked my one-way ticket happened to be the Lantern Festival. My advisor, Professor Zheng, walked me out of the research institute, gently reminding me, "We leave in 7 days. Annie, if there's anyone you can't bear to leave, make sure you say a proper goodbye." Spring had arrived in Beijing, but the air was still bitingly cold. I stood on the street for a long time. Finally, I pulled out my phone and called my second brother, Evan. After all, we'd been family for 20 years. No matter how ugly things had gotten, we should at least have one last meal together. But he hung up on me several times before finally just turning off his phone. Steeling myself, I then dialed my oldest brother, Ethan. This time, after a long wait, he answered, as if doing me a huge favor. Afraid he'd get impatient, I rushed my words. "It's the holiday today. Can we have dinner together at home tonight?" Remembering our housekeeper was off for the holiday, I carefully added, "I can cook. I'll make the sweet rice balls. Strawberry filled, Tina's favorite." Tina was the orphan girl my brothers had adopted. His voice was cold and impatient. "Thanks to you, Tina is still in the hospital. What right do you have to celebrate anything?" I pretended not to understand his disgust. "Then I'll cook and bring it to the hospital. We can eat together there, okay?" I had never been this meek before. After Tina arrived, I fought with Ethan and Evan for years. Even at our worst, I never would have backed down. But this time was different. This might be the last time we'd see each other for God knows how long. He didn't bother responding. After a moment, it was Tina's soft, childish voice that broke the silence. "I like sister's strawberry rice balls." I immediately jumped on it. "Okay, I'll make them and bring them over." With that, I quickly hung up, afraid he would say no. After hanging up, the wind stung my eyes. I bought the ingredients on the way home, quickly cooked the meal, packed it in a container, and rushed to the hospital. There was only one small table in the hospital room, barely big enough for 3 people. Ethan looked up at me. Before he could say anything, I had already served myself a small bowl and taken it over to the window to eat by myself. In my peripheral vision, I saw him flinch, just for a second. But it was only a flicker of surprise. He quickly went back to fussing over Tina, scooping rice balls into her bowl and handing her a spoon. The hospital chair was hard, so Evan put a pillow behind Tina's back. Tina was young and had a sweet tooth. She gobbled down several strawberry rice balls in a row. She ate too fast and started coughing softly. I couldn't help but glance over. I saw Evan immediately patting her back. Ethan quickly got up to pour her a glass of warm water. They feigned a scolding tone. "Slow down, it's not like anyone's going to steal them from you." It was an achingly familiar scene. Except the person sitting in Tina's spot used to be me. I was lost in the memory for a moment and forgot to look away. After handing her the water, Ethan seemed to feel my gaze and looked up. The gentle concern in his eyes turned to ice the moment they met mine. Honestly, it really hurt. I quickly looked down and shoveled the rice balls into my mouth. The filling caught in my throat, and I couldn't stop coughing. Ethan said flatly, "Do you need a glass of water too?" My heart clenched, and I forced the cough down. Soon, the room was filled again with the happy sounds of the 3 of them. Tina was enjoying her food and said in a stuffy voice, "Last week in language arts, we learned about the aurora borealis. I heard you can see it in Norway in the winter. I want to go see it when I grow up." Ethan stroked her head. "Why wait until you grow up? That's no big deal. We can go this year." Evan also chuckled. "Your Uncle Ethan and I have time off at the end of the year. We'll take you." Maybe the container was hot. My hand trembled, and I almost dropped the rice balls on the floor. They chatted excitedly, and in less than half an hour, they had even booked the plane tickets. Tina cheered and jumped into Ethan and Evan's arms with excitement. A moment later, she seemed to remember I was still there and tilted her head to ask me, "Annie, do you want to come with us?" I remembered I needed to tell Ethan and Evan I was leaving, so I took the opportunity. "No, I can't. In a few days, I have to go on a long trip with Professor Zheng." But Ethan cut me off impatiently. "You don't need to tell us about your plans." The words on the tip of my tongue, "and I don't know when I'll be back," were swallowed back down. Ethan remembered something and looked at me coldly. "Tina wants to be discharged tomorrow. You're the one who hurt her, so it's not safe for her to stay somewhere else." I was thinking I'd have the housekeeper clear out a guest room. Before he could finish, I spoke softly, "I'll clear out the master bedroom for her." Ethan stopped short. He looked like he'd misheard me. He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes filled with disbelief. "What?" After a moment of stunned silence, Evan also frowned. He probably thought I was being sarcastic. His tone was a bit impatient. "You don't have to be like that. We know you're petty. Once Tina's healed, she can move back out." I looked at them seriously. "Let her move in. She's young and needs someone to take care of her. It's a hassle for you guys to keep running back and forth. Besides, I'm barely home these past few years. The master bedroom is better for her anyway." Clang. Ethan threw his container onto the coffee table. The sudden noise made me stop talking. His face was dark. He probably still thought I was putting on an act. Tina had finished eating, and she yawned, asking Ethan to read her a bedtime story. Evan cleared the table. Ethan helped Tina lie down in her bed, picked up a storybook, and sat down to read to her. Just like countless times over the past few years, I was once again the awkward, unnecessary one. I stood up and grabbed my bag from the chair. When I spoke, my throat felt a little raw. "I'm leaving." No one answered. Evan calmly wiped the table, and Ethan softly read from the storybook. I walked toward the door, passing by Ethan. His eyes were fixed on the book, his head lowered. I couldn't see his face, couldn't read his expression. As I walked out the door, the last thing I heard was the sound of his voice reading. "And so Snow White was driven from her home." I suddenly remembered many years ago, when my parents were killed suddenly in a fire. Ethan, his eyes bloodshot, held me tight. In that same gentle voice he had choked out, "You still have your big brothers. As long as we're here, Annie, you will always have a home." Liar. For some reason, my nose started to burn. I rushed back to the university that night, and went to the lab, busy wrapping up an experiment. I only had 7 days left. In those 7 days, I had to sort out everything, both my studies and my personal life in Beicheng. I worked almost all night. The next morning, after a short nap, I went home. The master bedroom had to be cleared for Tina. The housekeeper, helping me pack up the guest room, grumbled indignantly. "Whoever heard of the owner sleeping in the guest room while an outsider takes the master?" I put my books and clothes into a suitcase and replied, "It's fine. I'll only be staying for a few days anyway." Behind me, a cold voice suddenly spoke up. "And where are you planning on going?" I turned around. There was Ethan standing behind me. The man's expression was icy, his gaze fixed on the suitcase I had just packed. Evan leaned against the bedroom doorway, looking at me with the same cold expression. Tina, who had followed them in, stared at my suitcase. She was just a kid, unable to hide the glint of anticipation in her eyes. For a moment, I wanted to tell them the truth. But then I remembered Ethan's impatient words. "You don't need to tell us about your plans." Suddenly, I didn't have the courage to speak. This way, when the day came for me to leave, I could at least lie to myself. They just didn't know it wasn't that they didn't care. I put my hand in my coat pocket, my knuckles white from clenching them. I feigned a casual tone. "I'm just moving my stuff to the other room. We agreed Tina could have the master bedroom." Ethan's expression softened slightly, but his voice quickly hardened again. "Tina is not staying here. It's only been a few days since you pushed her down the stairs. Do you really think we'd feel safe with you two under the same roof?" I responded instinctively, "Then I'll move into the dorms at school." The hint of warmth that had just appeared on Ethan's face vanished completely. I really didn't mean to provoke him. I just didn't want to make things difficult for them before I left. Tina had an innocent look on her face. This is your room, sister. I can't stay here. I said flatly, don't worry. Once I move out, I won't be back. Tina couldn't help but let a smile slip. Realizing her mistake, she quickly looked down, a guilty expression on her face. Ethan's voice was furious. Who are you threatening? Evan also sneered. If you want to move out, then move. It's not like anyone is begging you to stay. I didn't say another word and finished packing my things. After living in this house for over 20 years, I had too much stuff. I couldn't take it all, so I just picked out the important things and what my parents had left me. I filled 2 large suitcases and pushed them toward the door. Ethan's furious voice followed me. If you have the guts, then really don't come back. I struggled to drag the suitcases down the stairs and out the front door. Behind me, Ethan's voice was laced with anger and sarcasm. After all these years of fighting, it'll be nice to have some peace and quiet. Don't come crawling back home in 3 days. I was going to look for an umbrella, but his words made my throat tighten, and I walked straight out into the pouring rain. The rain was so heavy it soaked me to the bone in seconds. As I left the front yard, the rain blurred my vision. Ethan's raised voice continued behind me. From now on, whoever opens the door for her can get out with her. My eyes were so blurred I couldn't open them. I couldn't tell if it was rain or tears. On the sleeve of my soaked coat, a red stain began to seep through. The wound on my arm, which had just scabbed over, must have reopened when I was carrying my luggage downstairs. I didn't feel any pain, just a numbness that spread through my body as I dragged my suitcases toward the exit of the gated community. At this hour, I didn't know if the school dorms were still open. Truthfully, I didn't know where I was going. Tina ran out after me, her voice a dramatic, tearful cry, "Annie, Annie." Then came Ethan's urgent voice trying to stop her. Don't you know you're not well? What if you catch a cold in the rain? For a split second, I even thought he was calling my name. In that moment of daze, I faintly heard what he said next. Evan, have the housekeeper make some ginger tea for Tina. I tugged at the corner of my mouth, trying to smile but failing. Maybe it was because I had stayed up almost all night yesterday, and then rushed over this morning to pack. Now soaked by the heavy rain, my vision went black. Just as my body was about to collapse, a strong hand suddenly steadied me. At the same time, the rain pouring down on my head suddenly stopped. I struggled to look up, and it took a moment to see that it was Leo, a senior from my department. His car was parked in the downpour. Without a word, he took the luggage from my hands and put it in the trunk. From behind me, Ethan sneered, leaving so decisively. So you found yourself such a powerful backer. He must have followed me out just to watch me suffer. Leo looked at my miserable state and spoke up for me, filled with anger. Why do you even acknowledge brothers like them? You're leaving in a few days anyway. I quickly cut him off in a panic. Leo finally fell silent. He opened the car door and firmly pushed me inside. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Ethan's face darken for a second. Leo, what do you mean by that? Leo scoffed with disgust. What do I mean? You'll find out in a few days. My heart leaped into my throat. Ethan stood there, seemingly stunned. It wasn't until the car was about to pull away that he rushed forward, trying to pull my door open. Leo was already in the car and had swiftly locked the doors. Through the car window and the curtain of rain, I could vaguely make out Ethan's lips forming the words, "Annie, get out of the car." His expression was furious, yet it seemed to be mixed with some other strange emotion. I couldn't understand it, but I knew that, at this point, my leaving was probably insignificant to him, and to Evan. I closed my eyes and didn't look at him again. As the car drove away, Ethan stood there in the rearview mirror for a long time. Leo was still scolding angrily, "You're injured, and they kick you out in a storm. I really don't understand why you even came back to take this abuse." I turned my head and looked out the window at the torrential rain. After a long silence, I spoke softly, "They used to be really good to me." Leo didn't believe me. He had only met me in college. He had never seen Ethan and Evan treat me well. My eyes welled up with tears, and I repeated earnestly, "Really? They used to be so good to me." Ever since I can remember, my parents were rarely home. They dedicated almost their entire lives to drug development and medical research. They would often be gone for a year or more at a time. Growing up, the people who took care of me were a paid housekeeper and my two brothers, who were 8 years older than me. When I was 6 and just starting elementary school, the teacher announced a parent-teacher conference for new students. My parents were thousands of miles away, and I went home and cried under the covers. 14-year-old Ethan came into my room late at night to check if I had kicked off my blanket. When he pulled the covers back, he saw my tear-streaked face. He held me, and like my mom used to, he wiped away my tears. Then he patted my back and comforted me. "It's okay, Big Brother will go be your parent for you. Mom and Dad are busy, but Big Brother is never busy." The next day, he skipped class to go to my parent-teacher conference and got yelled at by my teacher for being irresponsible. When he got back to his own middle school, his homeroom teacher made him stand under the flagpole as punishment for the whole afternoon. When he didn't pick me up from school, I ran to his school next door to find him. He was still standing on the platform. The sun was blazing, and I was so worried he would get heatstroke that my eyes turned red. He ran down from the platform, a grin on his face, and comforted me. "This is nothing. The sun is warm, your brother likes to sunbathe." We ate at a street stall and walked home under the moonlight. When we got home, the housekeeper was off on leave. Evan had already cooked a hot meal. When he opened the door, the whole house was filled with a delicious aroma. The boy was getting bowls and chopsticks in the kitchen and poked his head out. "Wash your hands, time to eat." Evan was quiet by nature, but he was gentle and thoughtful. When I was playing and scraped my arm, and I snuck home afraid to say anything, he would silently roll up my sleeve, clean the wound with iodine, and then bandage it. When he was done, he would look up as if to say something. But seeing me bite my lip, guilty and anxious, he would just sigh softly. He would raise his hand, pat my head, and say, "Be more careful next time." I was a mischievous child and never learned to be careful. So he patched me up time and time again. And time again, seeing my flustered expression, he would sigh and tell me, "Be more careful next time." For the many years my parents were often away, they were like brothers and fathers to me, raising me. Until I was 12, and I saw the Northern Lights on TV. Ethan promised to take me to see them during the new year, and Evan booked tickets for the three of us. And then the next day, our parents died suddenly. Before the accident, my parents were developing a heart medication that was close to completion and was going to be released at a low price. When news of this leaked, it drew the hatred of pharmaceutical rivals. An arsonist set fire to their research lab in the middle of the night. The accident happened on the first day of the 12th lunar month. My parents had been working through the night at the lab, trying to get the new, affordable drug to heart patients before New Year's Eve. When Evan, Ethan, and I got the news and rushed over, all we saw were two charred bodies. That is my last memory of my parents. To this day, I still find it hard to remember what their faces really looked like. Along with them, one of my parents' students, a woman in her early 20s, also died in the fire. She was a newlywed, and her child was less than a year old when she died. Her husband had already passed away. Her burnt body was found still clutching a locket engraved with her daughter's name. After 6 long years of searching, Ethan and Evan finally found the child in an orphanage. Life has a way of being cruelly ironic. 6 months after 7-year-old Tina was brought to our home, I went out for dinner with classmates at a street food stall, and happened to overhear the orphanage director, drunk and crying, confess the truth. I learned that the real Tina had died of a heart condition at the orphanage when she was 3. The Tina who was sent to us was an orphan with liver failure, and no money for treatment. The director felt sorry for her, so she had her take the dead Tina's place so my brothers would pay for her medical care. I rushed home and walked in just as Tina was breaking another one of my things. It was a family photo of the 5 of us from when my parents were still alive. The frame hit the floor, and the glass shattered. Just like countless times before, Tina bent down to pick up the pieces, then held up her cut hand, looking pitifully for Ethan's comfort. Furious, I pulled her away and screamed uncontrollably, "Get out!" For the first time, Ethan's face darkened at me. Even the usually gentle and quiet Evan had a disappointed look on his face. "Annie, there's a limit to being spoiled and arrogant." I told them everything I had heard. I saw the panic in Tina's eyes. I thought, at least her illness has been cured. An imposter shouldn't continue to take over my home and my brothers, and she shouldn't be allowed to keep breaking my things. But the response I got was Ethan's furious shout. Annie, do you really hate Tina that much? She is the only child, the only connection left from our parents' most valued student. Doesn't your conscience bother you when you make up these lies? After that, we were never at peace again. Then a month ago, Tina used the same trick, breaking the medical research award I had just received. I chased her to the top of the stairs and, losing control, slapped her. She intentionally threw herself down the stairs. I tried to grab her and ended up falling down with her. My arm was injured in the fall. I struggled to get up. Before I could say a word, for the first time ever, Ethan slapped me across the face. The ever-gentle and quiet Evan spoke, his voice filled with rage. Annie, if you can't live here, then get out. They carried Tina to the hospital, leaving me behind also injured. The Northern Lights they had promised to take me to see, now 10 years later, became a trip they were taking with Tina. I pulled myself out of the memories. Beside me, Leo, who was driving, handed me a tissue. I paused for a moment, only then realizing my eyes were wet. The moment I agreed to my mentor's offer to join the 10-year classified research project, I thought I had let it all go. Only now did I realize that looking back on those memories could still bring tears to my eyes. It's okay. People just need a little more time to forget and move on. I went back to school, moved into the dorm, and continued to work on finishing my thesis. The next day, when Leo and I went to the library, I ran into Ethan and Evan again. They were with Tina. She had probably gotten a whim to see what a university library was like. Ethan was now a professor at a research institute, already an associate professor at just 30. It wasn't strange for him to be at the library. I pretended not to see them, found a seat, and opened my laptop to continue writing. But Tina pulled them to a table not far from me. I could occasionally hear the girls' soft laughter and chatter. Ethan seemed a bit embarrassed and tried to quiet her a few times, but she kept talking. Evan gently reminded her, "You need to be good." My mind suddenly flashed back to my childhood, to Evan always sighing and telling me, "Be more careful next time." I finished the last part of my thesis and clicked save. Feeling a bit suffocated, I got up to get a drink of water. When I returned a few moments later, my laptop was in Tina's hands. Ethan and Evan had gotten up to get books from the shelves. Tina was alone with my computer, her hand skillfully moving the mouse and clicking. A sense of alarm shot through me. I rushed forward and snatched the laptop back from her. She immediately fell to the ground dramatically, hitting her forehead on a chair and letting out a piercing scream. The students studying in the library all turned to look. With trembling hands, I found my thesis in the recycling bin. When I opened it, the nearly 6 months of work, the pages of text and charts, were all gone. All that was left was a smiley face made of symbols. A grotesque, leering smiley face stared back at me. My head was buzzing. Then Ethan, drawn by the noise, rushed over and, without asking any questions, demanded, "Annie, why did you push Tina?" Evan helped Tina up, his face showing his displeasure. More and more people started to gather around. Leo, who had been getting a book from a nearby shelf, heard the commotion and hurried over. He looked at my computer screen, then at my face, and quickly understood. "She deleted your thesis." The anger on Ethan's face froze for a second. He walked over and looked at my computer. After a long moment, he frowned. "That's impossible. Tina, she..." "Let's go," I said calmly, turning to Leo without waiting for Ethan to finish. It was strange. I should have been furious. I should have lost control and screamed at Tina, maybe even hit her, just like I had so many times before. And then, faced with Ethan and Evan's coddling of Tina, I should have gotten into a huge fight with them. But in that moment, all I wanted was to leave. I had been fighting with them for 4 years. Countless times over those 4 years, the outcome was always the same. Now, I didn't want to fight anymore. I was leaving in a few days anyway. I picked up my laptop and walked out of the library. Behind me, Ethan followed. I heard his voice, as detached as ever, but with a hint of unease. "I'm in charge of this thesis. I'll give you another week." I said flatly, "I don't need it." I didn't have another week. I walked toward the end of the hallway. I don't know what got into Ethan. After years of barely speaking to me, he suddenly ran up and grabbed my arm. Annie, what's been going on with you lately? His voice seemed to hold a flicker of anxiety, but I didn't turn back. I just reached out and gently pushed his hand away. As I stepped into the elevator, Evan came up and held the door. He looked at the laptop in my hand, his voice a little awkward. Give me the laptop. I'll have some time in a few days. I'll try to recover it for you. He had studied computer science and now ran his own tech company. I felt a slight pang in my chest. In all the years since Tina had arrived, it was always Ethan who argued with me, who got angry and accused me. Evan was quiet, with a gentle nature, and we rarely clashed. I didn't say anything for a long moment, just looked him in the eye. Until he spoke again. Tina's just a kid. Even if she did delete it, she probably didn't mean to. So he was afraid I'd resent Tina and push her down the stairs again? And here I thought for once he was finally willing to take my side. I forced a smile, feeling foolish. I reached out and pressed the close button on the elevator. The heart that had always been so unwilling to give up was now finally, gradually calming, becoming a still pool of water with no ripples. It seemed I didn't feel sad anymore. As the elevator doors closed, I said softly, "It's fine. Don't worry about it." Evan reached out urgently, probably trying to stop the closing doors, but it was too late. In that last glimpse, I thought I saw a flicker of panic and helplessness in his eyes. A fleeting image, and then the elevator doors shut completely. It was probably just my imagination. The next day, after finishing up my school-related matters, I did one last check of my luggage. At noon, I treated my roommates to a meal as a farewell. As I was leaving the restaurant, Evan suddenly called. I answered, but he was silent on the other end for a long time. I thought he might have dialed by accident. Just as I was about to hang up, he finally spoke. "When are you coming home?" I was taken aback. I couldn't help but wonder if he had meant to call Tina. But I still replied, "I'm busy with school lately, so I won't be back." But Evan wouldn't let it go. "What about tonight?" I didn't know what he was getting at. But I just made up an excuse. "I have plans with a classmate tonight." There was another long silence on the other end. After a while he spoke again, awkwardly. "It's my and your brother's birthday today." I was speechless for a moment. For so many years, I had been the one to plan their birthdays almost entirely by myself. Buying the cake, booking the venue, picking out gifts a month in advance. Ethan was busy with his students, Evan was busy with work, and neither of them was the type to make a fuss. It was always me who prepared everything, then dragged them out to celebrate, forcing them to look surprised. But this year, I had truly forgotten. I didn't know what to say. After thinking for a long time, I just said I'm sorry. It was such a distant and polite word. Another long silence. When Evan spoke again, his voice was a bit hoarse. "Come back for dinner tonight. I'll cook." I didn't really want to go. He continued. "The housekeeper took Tina to her evening tutoring class." The cold wind on the street stung my face. In the end, I agreed. Okay, this really would be the last meal. When I got home, Evan was in the kitchen cooking. As dusk fell, Ethan stood by the iron gate in the front yard smoking. In the freezing cold, I could see under the streetlights that his already pale face was turning blue. For a moment, I even felt like he was waiting for me. As I got closer, he seemed to choke on his smoke and coughed a couple of times. Now I really had nothing to say to him, so I just made small talk. "You should smoke less." Ethan didn't say anything, but he immediately put out his cigarette. I was a little surprised. I honestly didn't think he would listen to me. When I walked in, Evan poked his head out of the kitchen with bowls and chopsticks in his hands and said, "Wash your hands, time to eat." My eyes suddenly turned red. At the dinner table, Ethan brought up the trip to see the northern lights in Norway. "You'll be on break around that time too, so we booked an extra ticket for you to come with us." My hand, holding my chopsticks, froze in midair. Evan peeled a few shrimp for me and put them in my bowl. He spoke in a gentle voice, "We promised you a long time ago. But your brother and I have been busy with work, you know that." I lowered my head, my tears almost falling. So many years had passed, but they still remembered. I mumbled, "This Saturday, I have to go out of town with Professor Zhang." I probably won't make it back in time. Evan continued to peel shrimp for me, the grease staining his fair, slender fingers. He said, then we'll go before Saturday and come back early. We can go somewhere in the country. You can see the northern lights further north too. I wanted to refuse, but I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Deep down, it seemed there was still a lingering bit of hope I couldn't shake. So many years had passed, but I just couldn't forget that night. That night when Ethan and Evan booked the tickets and promised to take me to see the northern lights at the end of the year. That night when my parents were still alive, when Tina hadn't moved in, when my brothers were still so good to me. That night was the last night of my 12 years of happy, easy life. I always remembered that promise. It wasn't that I really wanted to go to Norway or see the northern lights that badly. I just missed the days when I was spoiled by my parents and brothers. As Evan spoke, he wiped his hands, took out his phone, and rebooked the tickets for a trip to Mo the next day. After booking the tickets, he hesitated, then patted my back. Annie, Tina is an outsider at the end of the day. Your brothers will always be your brothers. My eyes misted over, my hands trembled uncontrollably, and I couldn't even lift my head. After so many years, we finally had a calm and peaceful meal together. For a moment, I even felt like the 4 years Tina had lived here were just a figment of my imagination. Until, as the meal was ending, Ethan changed the subject. But people on the outside have different motives. Like Leo, you should know why he's getting close to you. You shouldn't be so friendly with him. I looked up, stunned. Ethan continued in a serious tone. The medical research that Mom and Dad had to stop is about to be restarted. You should have heard about it. I reviewed the list of participants for this study, and Leo is on it. He might be trying to bring you along so he can get the research results that were lost in the fire from you and claim them as his own. I couldn't listen anymore. I dropped my chopsticks and stood up. Leo isn't as despicable as you think. The feigned warmth on Ethan's face quickly turned cold. Annie, what kind of attitude is that? I'm your older brother. Would I ever try to harm you? Evan stood up and patted me on the shoulder, but his words carried the same meaning. Once that classified research starts, no one knows how many years it will take. Leo is probably just in it for the medical breakthroughs. Once he gets what he wants, he could find an excuse to leave at any time. But if you get dragged into it by him, the consequences will be unimaginable. Annie, think about Mom and Dad. Leo is an outsider after all. Your brother is just looking out for you. The flicker of hope that had just begun to stir in my heart froze over completely. So, this was the real reason they asked me to come back. Without any more hesitation, I pushed Evan's hand away. When I spoke, my eyes were filled with nothing but indifference. Leo has already made arrangements for his family. He won't just run away halfway through. Even if he did ask me to join, it would only be because he values my abilities. Someone in this world has to make sacrifices, like Mom and Dad did, like so many of our seniors and mentors did. What exactly do you mean by unimaginable consequences? Ethan's face turned completely black. You're just defending Leo, aren't you? Annie, you don't need to pull this noble act. I couldn't listen anymore. I grabbed my phone and walked out. Enraged, Ethan swept the dishes off the table. The sound of shattering porcelain was sharp and jarring. I didn't stop. I left the villa and hailed a cab. Unsurprisingly, the next morning, Evan called. He was hesitant. Tina doesn't want to go to Mo. She still wants to go to Norway. So, just then I got a text from Leo on my phone. I need to head over there first. I'm leaving at noon to get things ready at the new research institute. I'll see you when you get there on Saturday. I looked at the text message. On the phone, Evan's voice continued, sounding unusually guilty. When you get back from your trip with Professor Zheng, your brother and I will take you next year. I said softly, okay. Evan was silent for a long moment, then suddenly asked, Annie, are you doing okay lately? What a strange question. He had seen me almost every day during this time. Snow began to fall outside the window. The first snow in Beijing this year seemed to be later than usual. I replied, I'm doing fine. The line stayed open. I heard Evan speak again. Are you coming home to stay tonight? Ethan's slightly stiff voice joined in. The housekeeper is back. We're having sweet stuffed lotus root tonight. That was something 12-year-old Annie used to love. But I was 22 now and didn't really like sweet things anymore. I forced a smile. I won't be coming back tonight. And I won't be coming back ever again. Suddenly, I heard Tina's startled cry on the other end. Then Ethan's quick, anxious voice. I told you not to go in the kitchen. Look where you got burned. The call was abruptly disconnected. I listened to the dial tone, and after a moment, the screen went dark. Everything fell silent. I stood by the window for a long time, watching the snow fall outside. Then I took out my phone and replied to Leo's message. I'll go with you. I grabbed my already packed suitcase and booked the next available flight. I left the university, took a taxi to the airport. As the plane climbed to 30,000 feet, everything about Beijing gradually disappeared from view. The day I officially prepared to enter the Classified Research Institute was my third day in Nanshur. The director of the institute, Dr. Zhao, took us all out for lunch. After a few drinks, everyone was a little tipsy. By the end, many of the people sitting around the table had red eyes. Dr. Zhao told us to make one last call to our families and then said seriously, if you're scared or can't bear to leave, it's not too late to back out now. People around me started pulling out their phones to dial, and soon suppressed sobs could be heard. I sat in silence for a long time before finally taking out my phone and opening my social media. There was a red dot notification on my feed. I opened it and saw that Ethan had posted an update. He and Evan had taken Tina to Norway. In the photo, the sky was a dazzling display of colorful lights, like a giant overturned paint palette. The aurora lit up the snowy landscape as bright as day. Tina was wearing a thick, white down jacket and a bright red scarf wrapped snugly around her. She turned her head in the vast, snowy expanse, her eyes crinkling with a smile. That bright red scarf was one that Evan had knitted for me by hand when I was 10. Later, when Tina first came to Beijing, she said she wasn't used to the cold. Evan told me to give her the scarf and promised he would knit me a bigger one next time. Now, for years had passed, and he had never mentioned making me another one. Dr. Zhao's voice broke through my thoughts. Annie, make a call. After this, who knows how many years it will be before you get another chance. I clutched my phone, my knuckles turning white. After a long while, I finally dialed the number. The voice that answered was Tina's cheerful one. Hi sister, what's up? My voice was hoarse. Where are they? Tina answered brightly, you mean my uncles? They told me to answer. They said they're busy and that you can just tell me whatever it is. I could hear Ethan's raised voice in the background. Hang up and come here. Tina's voice was tinged with a laugh. She feigned innocence, but being so young, she couldn't hide the taunting and triumph in her tone. So sister, what is it? I can pass on the message for you. My heart finally calmed. I felt like there was nothing left to hold on to. I said flatly, it's nothing. I reached out and ended the call. After everyone had made their calls and we finished eating, we began to enter the research institute. Passing through the gate was like being completely cut off from the outside world. I took out my SIM card, broke it in half, and threw it in the trash. I stepped through the door and didn't look back. After only a week in Norway, Ethan suggested they go back. With the new year approaching, Tina was insisting they stay past New Year's Eve, saying there was a special celebration that day. Ethan instinctively wanted to refuse. Even though his university was on winter break and he had no work to do, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing on this trip. They had only been there for 7 days, but it felt like a very long time. He was trying to think of an excuse to go back. Before he could, Evan, who was next to him, spoke up gently. If you like it, we can always come back another time. I have things to take care of at my company. I can't be away any longer. Tina was in the middle of having fun and retorted unhappily. But you just told Annie that you weren't going to the office for New Year's Eve or the holidays. Evan fell silent, looking out the window as if he felt guilty. After a moment, he frowned and deliberately changed the subject. I've told you many times, don't call her Annie. You should call her sister. Tina scoffed dismissively, tossed her new doll aside and ran out. Ethan looked at the teddy bear lying on the floor. For some reason, he suddenly remembered it was the kind of toy his little sister, Annie, used to love. What was the little Annie like? Ethan tried hard to remember, but found that he couldn't quite picture her. All that came to mind was the image of Annie screaming and crying, telling Tina to get out. And then the adult Annie, who became more and more silent. She stopped talking to him and Evan, always saying she was busy with school and rarely coming home. Occasionally, when Tina broke one of her things, she would lose her temper, but then she would compose herself and say calmly and indifferently, "Forget it." She started staying at the dorm more and more. Ethan would sometimes see her on campus. One second she would be laughing with her classmates, the next her eyes would meet his, and her expression would immediately become quiet and anxious. Ethan picked up the doll from the floor. He suddenly thought, he seemed to have lost something. When did he lose it? The willful, charming Annie, when did she disappear? Evan's somewhat cold voice interrupted his thoughts. "I'm flying back tonight. If Tina wants to stay and play, you can stay with her." Ethan looked up abruptly and saw a flicker of unease in Evan's eyes. An unease that mirrored his own. Almost instinctively and urgently, Ethan said, "I'm flying back tonight too." Evan didn't say anything else and silently started packing his luggage. They landed in Beijing the next evening. On the way home, for some reason Ethan's brow kept twitching. When they got home, there was no sign of Annie. The housekeeper came out to greet them. He handed her his coat and asked casually, "Is Annie still not back?" The housekeeper shook her head. "Mississippi Annie hasn't been back." Ethan frowned. "It's been over a week. Tomorrow is the little new year. How could she not be back?" The housekeeper had been with the family for many years and felt sorry for Annie. Her voice couldn't help but sound a little cold. "I don't know." Ethan wanted to ask more. Tina rolled her eyes impatiently and whined, clinging to his arm. "She'll come back eventually. Come on, Ethan. Don't worry about it. Come look at the new storybook I bought. You can read it to me tonight." Ethan suddenly felt annoyed. He remembered how Tina had disrespectfully used Annie's full name in Norway. And now, she was clearly unconcerned about Annie being gone for days. How much sincerity was there in her sister this and sister that? The housekeeper turned to go into the kitchen and muttered under her breath. "Since the masters don't care about Mississippi Annie anymore, why even bother asking?" The words were like an invisible needle, pricking at Ethan's heart. Tina grumbled, "She's a grown woman, it's not like she's going to get lost." For some reason, a wave of anger surged through him. Ethan violently shook off the hand clinging to him. With a cold face, he went straight upstairs. Behind him, Tina shrieked tearfully, "Big brother, did I say something wrong? Aren't you going to read me a story?" Ethan didn't turn back, just said coldly, "You're in the 6th grade, can't you read yet?" Tina's wronged cry. Normally, Ethan would have turned back to comfort her. Whenever she cried, he would give in to whatever she wanted. He had always thought that being unkind to Tina would be a betrayal to his parents and their most valued student. But it had been 4 years. He had doted on Tina, given her everything, and he believed he had done right by the student who died with his parents in the fire. But what about Annie? What about his own sister? Ethan went upstairs and stood in front of Annie's bedroom. He pushed the door open. It was empty. He went inside and looked around, only then realizing she had taken so many things with her. A sudden wave of anxiety washed over him. It was like an invisible, dense vine, slowly creeping up his neck, making it hard to breathe. He sat on the sofa, opened his phone, and scrolled through it over and over. There were no missed calls or texts from Annie. No updates on her social media, nothing. Why wasn't she home yet? He scrolled through his contacts again and again. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, he called Annie's advisor, Professor Zheng. The call connected quickly, and the middle-aged professor's calm voice came through. Ethan beat around the bush, talking about anything and everything. Finally, he awkwardly asked, "Has Annie given you any trouble these past 2 days?" Professor Zheng's voice was surprised. "Annie? How could she possibly give me any trouble?" For some reason, Ethan's temples started to throb. "Didn't she go out of town with you for something? She's not back yet, right?" There was a long pause on the other end. The professor's voice became heavy, filled with an undeniable sadness. "Professor Pei, what kind of joke is this? I did see Annie off, but how could she possibly come back with me?" The phone slipped from Ethan's hand and clattered to the floor. On the screen, the call timer was still running. The bedroom was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. He felt like he must have misheard something. What did he mean? How could Annie possibly come back? His breathing became rapid, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. It felt like a string in his mind had been stretched to its absolute limit, ready to snap at any second. Ethan's mind went blank. After a long moment, he picked up the phone. I don't think I understood. What did you just say? The voice on the other end seemed to be getting farther and farther away. The string in his mind finally snapped. Anyone else might not understand, Professor Pei. But how could you not understand? If you hadn't pulled out at the last minute, Annie wouldn't have gotten the spot. I heard from Annie that you pulled out for that little girl, Tina, right? Ethan's face went deathly pale. On such a cold winter day, cold sweat beaded on his forehead. He had never felt such immense fear before. Like he was dropping a hot potato. He fumbled, trying to hang up the phone. But his hands wouldn't obey him. The words he had heard, like a curse, started replaying over and over in his mind. Anyone else might not understand, but you should. Wasn't it your spot that opened up when you pulled out? For Tina? No. His name was originally on that list of participants. He had decided to pull out at the last minute because he couldn't bear to leave Annie. With their parents gone, he was afraid Evan wouldn't be able to take good care of his Annie if he left. Just as Annie had said, someone in this world has to make sacrifices, like their parents did. So he had made a very difficult decision. But as the departure date approached, he just couldn't let go of that personal attachment, couldn't bring himself to leave. It wasn't because of Tina. How could it be because of Tina? And Annie thought it was because of Tina? So that's why she chose to take his place. How could she? Large beads of sweat dripped down his forehead. His body felt like it was on fire. Yet at the same time, it felt like he had been plunged into an icy abyss. Ethan gasped for air, but still felt like he was suffocating. Impossible. Professor Zheng's voice on the other end was puzzled. Professor Pei, you can't possibly not know. Before Annie went into the research institute, she made one last call to you. In the midst of his overwhelming fear, despair, and confusion, Ethan managed to pull back a sliver of rationality. He instinctively retorted, No, she didn't contact me. Right, they had been siblings for over 20 years. Even if they had grown distant. Even if she held a lot of resentment in her heart. Before a 10-year classified research project, she would have at least given him a heads up. So, she must not have gone. Professor Zheng stated firmly, That's impossible. I was in the private room at the time. When I stood up, I saw her dial your number with my own eyes. It was last Saturday around noon. Ethan was about to deny it again. But in a flash, he suddenly remembered something. Last Saturday around noon. At that time, it would have been about 5 in the morning in Norway. That day, at 5 in the morning, he had just taken Tina to see the northern lights. Tina had insisted on taking lots of photos, and had played excitedly until almost dawn before heading back to the hotel. On the way back, Tina took his phone, saying she wanted to look at the pictures they had taken. She walked while looking at the phone, and soon he had left her behind. Ethan stopped and turned around, seeing her holding the phone to her ear. She was probably listening to the audio from a video they had taken. He had called out to her impatiently, Hang up and come here. A terrible premonition, like a surging tide, rushed over him, threatening to drown him. So, at that moment, was Tina really just looking at photos and videos? The call on the other end had been disconnected at some point. The bedroom door, which he had closed, was suddenly pushed open with force. Ethan jerked his head up, hoping with every fiber of his being that it was Annie, back home. Just like countless times before, coming home late from school. It didn't matter if she ignored him, if she had a cold face, if she had gotten into trouble. He could forgive her for trying to kick Tina out. He could forgive her for pushing Tina down the stairs. Suddenly, he felt like he could let go of everything. As long as she came back, it would be okay. But when the bedroom door opened, the person who rushed in, reeking of the cold, was Evan, his eyes bloodshot. His hair and clothes were covered in snow. He must have rushed back from somewhere. After landing in Beicheng, he had taken a cab and left directly, without going home with Ethan and Tina. Ethan didn't know where he had gone. The man who was always so calm and composed now had a dark, grim face. He didn't even say hello. He strode straight into the walk-in closet, then into the bathroom. Then he went out into the other bedrooms, the study. Ethan knew what he was looking for. Ethan sat on the bed, unable to even find the strength to stand up. Evan quickly finished searching upstairs and downstairs, and then came back. He walked up to Ethan, and Ethan saw his pale, ashen face. When he spoke, Evan's face and voice were trembling. "Annie's gone. She's gone." Ethan opened his mouth, but it took a long moment for any sound to come out. As if trying to comfort himself, he repeated what Tina had said. She'll come back. She's a grown woman, she won't get lost." Evan's eyes were bloodshot, misting over. He reached out, his hand trembling uncontrollably, and violently grabbed Ethan by the collar. "She left with Leo. I checked the school's security footage. She left with her suitcases, with Leo." Evan's voice trembled more and more violently as he tightened his grip on Ethan's collar, almost choking him. "Do you understand me? She left with Leo. You know what Leo is doing, don't you? Don't you?" Breathing was difficult, but Ethan forgot to move. After the immense fear and despair, what was left was an endless, abyss-like confusion. How could he not know what Leo was doing? The list of participants for the 10-year classified medical research project, Ethan, as an associate professor and an advisor at the institute, he, along with a group of senior colleagues, had personally reviewed and confirmed it. Leo was on that list. And just a few days ago, starting last Saturday, the research had officially begun. It was obvious where Leo had gone. Ethan staggered to his feet and walked out of the room in a daze. "I'll go look for her. I'll ask her to come home. Tomorrow is the little New Year. She always spends the New Year at home." Evan's face contorted, his voice filled with despair. "Why did you have to listen to Tina? Why did you have to go to Norway? We agreed to go to Mo. Annie had even agreed to go to Mo. If we had gone, maybe she wouldn't have been able to bring herself to leave." Ethan didn't say anything. He reached the bedroom door. Behind him, Evan's pained scream rang out. "Stop pretending. Ethan, how long has it been since you last cared about Annie?" Ethan froze. He felt his movements become incredibly slow. It took him a long moment to turn around and look at Evan blankly. "And you? Have you cared?" The anger, hatred, and grief on Evan's face froze in an instant. Then he slowly sank to the ground, buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. They were the same. Neither of them was innocent, neither could escape blame. A heavy snow had been falling on Beijing for days. In the dead of night, the streets were covered in a thick blanket of snow. Ethan, having forgotten even to put on his coat, left the house and went to find Professor Zhang. Professor Zhang's voice was helpless. "It's not that I won't tell you. This research is classified. Apart from the people involved, no one else will know the specific location or progress of the research. I only took Annie and the others to Nanshire and had one last meal with them. After they left for the research institute, I was no longer authorized to follow them. The exact location of the institute is most likely not in Nanshire." Ethan's voice was hollow. "There has to be a way. I'll think of something. There has to be a way to find her." Professor Zhang sighed softly. "Forgive my bluntness. The reason your parents had the accident was because the research progress was leaked. The lack of security allowed criminals to find an opportunity. This time, until the research is over, no outsider will be able to find them." Ethan, like a lost soul, said stubbornly, "I will find a way." Professor Zhang couldn't help but remind him, "If you make a big fuss about looking for Annie, you could put her in danger. Professor Pei, don't forget your parents. If you really care about Annie, respect her choice." Ethan's pupils trembled violently. The heavy snow in the dead of night had turned the vast city of Beijing into a silver-white world. It seemed to have completely frozen him as well. He stood there, unable to even move his fingertips. Annie was gone, and he couldn't even try to find her. Professor Zhang turned around, went into his front yard, and closed the gate. In the freezing snow, Ethan was finally alone. No, there was one more person. He turned and saw Evan standing under a tree behind him. Their eyes met under the cold streetlights, and in each other's eyes, they saw the same, completely shattered hope. Ethan suddenly remembered many years ago. It was a similar heavy snow in Beijing. Their parents had died suddenly, and 12-year-old Annie had cried in the snow until she could barely breathe. At that time, he had held her and said, As long as your brothers are here, Annie will always have a home." It seemed he had broken his promise. Ethan didn't dare to go home anymore. He didn't know where to go. He drove aimlessly around the streets. Until somehow, he ended up at the orphanage in the suburbs. He just suddenly remembered that his estrangement from Annie, their arguments. It all started when he brought Tina back from the orphanage. If time could go back to that point, if he had never brought Tina back, what would things be like now? His thoughts were a chaotic mess. Until he suddenly saw, under the moonlight and streetlights, two figures standing outside the orphanage gate. One large, one small. The smaller one, even in the dim light, Ethan could easily recognize as Tina. He was in a daze, and he hadn't even turned on his headlights when he drove over. So the two of them didn't notice him approaching. It was as if an invisible force was pulling him. Ethan stopped the car and walked over silently. He was actually quite close. Perhaps if they had glanced over, they would have seen him in the darkness. But they were clearly engrossed in their conversation. Their words laced with argument, and neither had time to look elsewhere. For the first time Ethan heard Tina, who was only 11, speak with such a sinister tone. "Do you think if you go and tell them again that I'm not the real Tina, they'll still believe you? Why should I listen to you and come back just because my illness is cured? They've raised me for 4 years. They already see me as their real sister. They don't even care about Annie anymore. That bitch Annie called last week and I answered. I could tell from her tone. She's not coming back. From now on, I'll be their only sister, just me. So what if she's the real one? For years, I've broken so many of her things, and her 2 brothers only ever protected me. I pretended she pushed me, and that idiot actually tried to catch me. She ended up falling and getting hurt herself and still got slapped. Serves her right. She wanted to go to Mo, but I wanted to go to Norway. And didn't they take me to Norway in the end? From now on, everything is mine. Everything will be mine alone. Perhaps because she felt these were things to be incredibly proud of and show off. As Tina spoke, her eyes were filled with the triumphant and ecstatic joy of victory. Her face was twisted with a ferocious expression that was disturbingly out of place for her age. Their argument continued endlessly. Ethan wanted to rush forward. He wanted to tear them apart, to cut them into 1,000 pieces. But he couldn't move. If he killed the people in front of him, would his Annie come back? Could the outcome be changed? No, it couldn't. It couldn't. It was too late. It was already too late. Countless images flashed through his mind like a slideshow. The first time Annie told Tina to get out, desperately trying to explain that she was a fake. The first time Annie's photo frame was broken. The first time she broke down sobbing. The first time Annie covered her face, and in her most helpless and aggrieved moment, chose to swallow her tears and remain silent. The first time Annie fell down the stairs. The first slap he had given her. Every single moment, every single drop, had paved the way for her to leave. Never before had Ethan realized with such clarity that he had lost Annie. She was gone, and she wasn't coming back. Ethan didn't know how he got home. When he walked in, he saw Evan slumped on the sofa. The housekeeper sat across from Evan, her expression indifferent. It's not that I'm only telling the truth now. Which of these things did Mississippi Annie not tell you the truth about? Evan stared at her blankly, his eyes empty. He must have heard the same thing Ethan had. The housekeeper's voice was pained. I've taken care of Mississippi Annie for many years. I just believed that although she could be willful and mischievous at times, she knew what was important. She would never lie about something she shouldn't. They had once believed that too. But why, after Tina came, did they stop believing Annie? Evan stood up and staggered upstairs. Ethan followed him, watching him go into the bedroom, open his suitcase, and take out a bright red scarf. Evan mumbled to himself, I promised her. When she comes back, I should give it to her. Ethan's voice was hoarse. She's not coming back. Evan's thin lips trembled, and finally, unable to control it any longer, he cried for the first time. Tears silently soaked into the scarf, his voice trembling so much that it was no longer coherent. Yes, she's not coming back. I left the research institute 12 years later. The drug development was a complete success, and the new, low-cost medication for heart failure was approved and went on the market. The day I attended the press conference with my colleagues and mentors, Many heart failure patients and their families came to the venue on their own accord, their emotions running high as they cried and expressed their gratitude. That day happened to be the first day of the 12th lunar month, the anniversary of my parents' death in the line of duty. It was as if time had rewinded and rewritten their ending. I was suddenly reminded of a night many years ago, when my mother held me and said gently, "If we can just speed things up a little, those patients can get affordable medicine before the new year, and have a good holiday." Back then, I only half understood many things, and I couldn't comprehend the fire and mist in my mother's eyes. She said softly, "There are so many patients in this world who choose to give up on life because of poverty and high-priced drugs. For every dollar the price of a drug drops, perhaps one more patient will find the hope to live. Annie, this is your parents' hope too. They left so suddenly and unceremoniously, with their wishes unfulfilled. And now, I had finally written the last for them. So in the afterlife, could they finally rest in peace?" I accepted the flowers from the patients and the interviews from the swarming reporters. In the bustling crowd, my eyes suddenly met a familiar pair. Across the sea of people, I suddenly saw Ethan in the distance and Evan with him. We hadn't seen each other in 12 years. They had started to age, just like me. Doing the math, they were both over 40 now. Evan had fine lines around his eyes, his face etched with weariness and fatigue. And Ethan, at only 42, already had white hair at his temples. Our eyes met, and for a moment, it felt like a lifetime had passed. The big brother who skipped class to attend my parent-teacher conference, the second brother who stood on a stool to cook for me, the mischievous little Annie from my childhood. Now we were all starting to get old. They forced a smile, looking like they were about to cry. After 12 years, they watched me intently from a distance. But in the end, they didn't take a single step closer. I smiled back at them, my heart filled with nothing but peace. The 12 years hadn't erased the resentment and hatred, but it had finally allowed me to truly let go. After the press conference, I left with my colleagues and mentors. Behind me, a hoarse and urgent voice suddenly called out, "And Annie? How long has it been since someone called me Annie? I can't remember." The others in my group saw what was happening and left first. Leo gently patted my shoulder. "Annie, I'll wait for you outside." I nodded. I turned around and saw Ethan and Evan rushing towards me, looking flustered. They stopped a couple of steps away, as if they didn't dare to get any closer. I looked at them, and a long silence hung between us. Until Ethan finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "How have you been all these years?" I said gently, "I've been well." Evan tried his best to hold it in, but his eyes still revealed immense pain and regret. "We know everything about Tina. Annie, it's our fault. We're so sorry." My heart was no longer stirred. I just said calmly, "It's okay. It's all in the past." Ethan's face trembled. After a moment, he asked cautiously, Could we have a meal together?" I shook my head. "I don't think so." The hope in their eyes instantly dimmed. I didn't stay any longer and turned to leave. Behind me, Ethan's hoarse voice called out again, "I'm sorry." I paused for a moment, but I walked out of the conference hall without looking back. I went back to Beijing to see my mentor, Professor Zhang. After 12 years, his hair was completely white. He told me about Ethan and Evan's breakdown and remorse in the 12 years I was gone. Evan fell into a deep depression, ending up in the emergency room dozens of times for alcohol poisoning. Ethan, in his years of grief, participated in many of the Institute's medical experiments and research projects. The constant all-nighters and overwork caused his health to decline rapidly. As for Tina, she was kicked out of the family home. Having grown accustomed to a life of luxury, she refused to go back to the orphanage. She later started hanging out with a group of delinquents and got into a horrific motorcycle accident while joyriding. She barely survived, but she broke her leg and suffered brain damage. Now no one knows where she is, just a mentally disabled wanderer. No one knows if she's dead or alive. Listening to all this, my heart remained calm. In the end, Professor Zhang sighed softly. They know they were wrong. They've regretted it for so many years. "Annie, have you ever thought?" I gently interrupted him. "I don't think about it anymore. For me, it's all in the past. I will continue to dedicate the rest of my life to medical research. As for my two brothers, I don't hate them. But I don't want to go back either. At 37, I married Leo. Because I was older, Leo didn't want me to risk pregnancy, so we adopted a newborn daughter. On her 3rd birthday, I threw her a party. After the party ended, I saw off the last few guests. As I was about to go back inside, I saw Ethan and Evan standing in the shadows under a tree in the distance. This year, I was 40, and they were nearly 50. Ethan was in a wheelchair. I was a little surprised and couldn't help but look a little longer. They must have been standing there for a long time, but they hadn't dared to come in. Noticing my gaze, their eyes lit up with joy. Evan immediately pushed the wheelchair and hurried towards me. Only then did I notice they were both holding things. Evan carefully handed me a gift box. "This is a gift for your daughter. I hope she likes it." His voice was filled with an undeniable humility and anxiety. After a moment's hesitation, I finally reached out and took it. Ethan's eyes brightened, and he immediately handed me a bouquet of flowers. "It's been so long, I forgot to congratulate you." I didn't know what he was referring to. Was it my successful completion of the 10-year research project, my marriage, or my daughter? But I didn't ask. I just took it and said in a warm but distant voice, "Thank you." Evan was still holding a gift bag. With trembling hands, he took out a bright red scarf. As he handed it to me, he didn't dare to look up at me. "I'm sorry. I've owed you this for a long time." I vaguely remembered the dimly lit bedroom, where Evan stayed up late by the window, knitting me a scarf. It was just because I had seen a classmate showing off a scarf her mother had knitted for her. My mother didn't have the time, and Ethan was too clumsy for that kind of craft. So Evan had secretly found the girl who had given him a scarf and asked her to teach him how to knit. For me, it was never just a scarf. And now a scarf couldn't make up for it either. But I smiled and still didn't refuse. In the end, my hands were full. They finally left. I turned to go back into the house. As I reached the front yard gate, I bent down and placed everything they had given me outside the door. My brothers had never given me so many things at once. But this time, I didn't want them. As I put the things down, I happened to look back. I saw Ethan and Evan, who hadn't gone far, stop and look back as well. They saw the things left on the ground, and then, with the same sad and flustered expressions, they looked away. That night, I received a call from the hospital. They told me Ethan was on his deathbed and asked if I wanted to see him one last time. In the end, I rushed to the hospital. For so many years, Ethan had also thrown himself into medical research, giving it his all. As a mentor, and as a researcher. Now not even 50, his body was already riddled with illnesses. I entered the hospital room and sat by his side. I suddenly remembered my daughter's birthday party yesterday. He had come to see me in a wheelchair, forcing himself to be there. It must have been his final goodbye. Evan sat across from me, his expression grief-stricken. A man nearly 50 years old. Yet he covered his face and sobbed uncontrollably. I looked at Ethan. Tubes inserted all over his body, the monitors beeping steadily. An oxygen mask covered his mouth and nose. He struggled to open his mouth, but I couldn't hear his voice. After decades as siblings, I easily recognized the shape of his lips. He was calling my name, over and over, urgently and weakly. "Annie, Annie." I thought of that heavy snow again, and of the less than 20-year-old Ethan who held me tightly. "As long as your brother is here, Annie will always have a home." Looking back on those years, it felt like a long dream. His face was ashen, his breathing more and more labored. When he reached out to touch me, it seemed to take every last bit of his strength. In the end, I reached out and gently held his hand. And I said softly, "Hey, when you get to the other side, get some rest, okay?" I saw a tear slide from the corner of his eye. It seemed he had 1,000 words to say, but in the end, all he could do was repeat those 2 words over and over. "Annie, Annie." I watched him close his eyes. The heart rate monitor gradually flatlined into a long, unending line. When I left the hospital, it was snowing heavily again. Leo was waiting for me outside the hospital. When he saw me, he draped his coat over my shoulders. As I was about to get in the car, I felt a sense of intuition and turned around. I saw Evan behind me. His hair was also starting to turn white. His eyes filled with a world-weary look. The snowflakes fell, landing on his hair and shoulders. Through the wind and snow, I said to him, From now on, take care of yourself." His eyes, which had just stopped crying, suddenly turned red again. He opened his mouth, and countless words seemed to be on the tip of his tongue, but in the end, they all melted into one sentence. "You too." I opened the car door and got in. As the car drove away, the lonely, slightly stooped figure behind me gradually disappeared. Snowflakes fell on the car window, blurring my vision. In a daze, I saw that home again. It was a snowy New Year's Eve, and our family of 5 was gathered around a hot pot for dinner. Mom held up her glass, and Dad poured the wine. Under the warm lights, 5 glasses clinked together, followed by the family's cheerful wishes. "After this New Year's Eve dinner, we'll be together and happy every year from now on." The end.